Without further ado, good evening, everyone. Welcome to YWCA's 111th annual meeting. The time's now, let's see, which 5:34, and I'm going to call this meeting to order. My name is Allison Capuccio. I'm president of the board of directors of the YWCA New Britain, and on behalf of the YWCA's members and directors, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you all to today's virtual meeting. Today, we'll be voting in new board members, recognizing some outstanding volunteers, and celebrating our successes and programs. And to start off, I'd like to open up the business portion of our meeting. And so first on our agenda, I'd like to ask for a motion to dispense with the reading of the minutes of the 2020 annual meeting.
I motion.
Awesome.
I second, Shannon Walsh.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Excellent. And next, I'm going to ask Tootie Miller-Fulton. Tootie's on, right? I didn't see her on there, but I assume
Yes,
she is.
she's on.
All right, awesome. I'd like to ask Tootie Miller-Fulton to present the nominating committee report.
Thank you, Allison, to the nominating committee report. The slate of officers and directors that was elected by ballot vote is Officers President Allison, Vice President of Fundraising is Shannon Walsh, Co-Vice Presidents of Policy Veronica Delandro and Angelica Wilson, Treasurer Rona Cohen O'Brien, and Secretary Monica Stelmacher. The candidates whom we have on for the 2021-2024 term, absolutely looking forward to working with each of you, is Barbara Gurr, Tennille Hacker, who I already heard enjoys the hot weather, Esther Santana, and Monica Stelmacher. And the members of the board who will continue to serve are Maha Abdullah, Jeanette Edwards, Megan Hill, myself, Tootie Miller-Fulton, and Jennifer Yarsowich. Thank you to all of our voting members and welcome and congratulations to our new directors. YWCA's that's around the board of directors, and then from a board of trustees perspective, the YWCA's board of trustees is a committee of the board that is elected by the board of directors. I am pleased to share the following slate of officers and trustees appointed by the board of directors this year. Officers, the chair is John Miller, and then the candidates for the 2021-2024 term is Juan Berrios, Nicolene Carr, Gabriela de Blasi, Regan O'Malley. Members of the Board of Trustees who will continue to serve are Matt Abdafar, Miranda Brown-Stitzer, Dennis Brown, Magdalena Jandro, Tracy Nixon Moore, and Linnell Tarka. Were there any questions from anyone on any of those announcements? Okay, thank you, everyone. Looking forward to another year of doing this.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Tootie. All right, we also have a couple board members that we definitely want to recognize whose terms are ending. Lisa Modio and Stacy Ormsby. Thank you both so much for your service and commitment to the YWCA. I made my thoughts known on that. We'll miss you very dearly. All right, so at this time, I'd like to go ahead and introduce John Miller, our chair of the board of trustees, who will be giving the trustees report tonight.
Thank you, Allison. In a year in which the stock and bond markets were first rocked by the COVID-19 pandemic and then experienced a recovery as corporations adjusted the ways in which they do business and the financial markets stabilized, the YWCA New Britain Endowment had a positive performance of 9.63%. The equity strategies had returns of 13.37% and 15.33% respectively. The bond portfolio had a total return of 6.97%. Overall, the endowment remains moderately invested at approximately 60% stocks and 40% bonds. The endowment had a 2020 year-end value of $1,484,872. And I'd like to recognize our investment advisors, Paul Valleda and Jared Bloxam from Janney, for their continued guidance and support over these past several years. Paul has been our main contact since I had served on the board and has always provided tremendous insight and great advice with respect to our endowment. He attends our meetings, reviews the performance of the portfolio, and explains any recommended changes to investments, all in an easily understandable manner. Although we don't see Jared as often, we know he is working right beside Paul with the best interests of the YWCA in mind. I'd also like to thank a few of our trustees whose terms are ending: Jeff Barlow, Curtis Dennison, and John Downs. Thank you for your commitment and service to the YWCA. Your input and guidance over the years has been invaluable. Your presence will certainly be missed on our board. And lastly, I'd be remiss if I didn't recognize Tracy, her leadership team, and staff for the amazing job they've done leading this organization through the trials and tribulations of this pandemic. Thank you for all your hard work. And now back to Allison for your remarks.
Thank you, John. Without a doubt, 2020 was certainly a challenging year for many people and organizations, and the YWCA was no exception. Despite the COVID-19 pandemic, an election season, and a nationwide reckoning with racism, the YWCA persevered. And I'm happy to report on some of the successes and impact the YWCA had in 2020. 647 people received comfort, compassion, and counseling provided by our Sexual Assault Crisis Service. SACS volunteers contributed 6,827 hours of their time to help survivors and their families regain feelings of independence, optimism, and hope. 270 children ages 1 through 5 received quality care and education through our nationally accredited childcare program, and parents were able to keep going to work knowing their children were safe, learning, and having fun. This year, both the Strive and House of Teens programs were offered in person and virtually to great success. The Strive program for middle school girls gave 88 students a safe and comfortable place to learn and have fun after school. The House of Teens served 64 high school girls, giving them the opportunity to learn job readiness skills, participate in advocacy activities, learn about healthy choices, and so much more. 139 people participated in our first 21-day Racial Equity and Social Justice Challenge. This challenge was designed to create dedicated time and space to build more effective social justice habits, particularly those dealing with issues of race, power, privilege, and leadership. 49 mothers who faced social, economic, or educational barriers persevered through this pandemic to participate in our Family Literacy Center. These determined women studied to either learn English as a second language or obtain their GED to further their education or become gainfully employed. And after pivoting to offer both in-person and virtual fitness and wellness classes, we empowered 260 members to take charge of their health, stay active, and meet their fitness goals. So we all know a challenge during a pandemic, so good. Last year, the total enrollment for dance classes was 354. These dancers worked hard all year to proudly dazzle spectators at the annual recital and the upcoming one, I hear, which was safely held last year at Walnut Hill Park. Everyone can find out more details about all of the impacts that our programs have had in our community this year at our annual report, which will be mailed out very soon and also be available online. I'm going to turn it over to Tracy now to recognize some of our remarkable volunteers who helped make all these accomplishments possible.
Okay, thanks, Allison. This is one of my favorite parts of the annual meeting. So every year at the annual meeting, we recognize outstanding volunteers of the YWCA. We're very appreciative of all of our volunteers and the invaluable work they do for us. And we couldn't accomplish all of the things Allison just shared with you without them. So we're now going to share a video highlighting some of this year's outstanding volunteers.
Hello, everybody. My name is Alyssa D'Amato, and I am the volunteer program manager for the Sexual Assault Crisis Service.
And my name is Bradley Lagna, and I am the volunteer program assistant with SACS. And we are so excited to announce that we have chosen Sarah as our volunteer of the year. And I have to say, every time this time of year comes around, it's always very difficult for us to make this decision because all of our volunteers are so top-notch. They're so dedicated to the work and they all do such a great job. And it's always tough to make that decision because we wish we could choose all 30 plus of our volunteers, but we selected Sarah this year and Alyssa will share why.
Yeah, so something that I agree with Bradley, and something that we talked about a lot when we were thinking about who to nominate is sort of what this last year has looked like for us at SACS and through our volunteer program. And when our pandemic hit, or when the pandemic hit in March of 2020, we were literally right in the midst of one of our counselor advocate training. And obviously, just like everybody else, we really had to quickly adjust to what it looked like to learn online and teach online, and learn those like crisis counseling skills in that like virtual setting, which is what feels less personal and less hands-on. And Sarah was one of the students who was in that class with us as we sort of transitioned from being in person to being online. And her presence in that class just really helped to like ease so much of that transition. She helped guide our class discussions. She shared a bunch of resources and insight and was never one to shy away from asking questions and making sure that the class was getting as much out of the material as they possibly could be. And since becoming certified, like that energy hasn't really shifted at all. She is one of the like most supportive folks that I can think of to support survivors on our hotline. And she really is an advocate in more ways than one. On our hotline, she really exemplifies so many of the effective counseling qualities and tools and techniques that we have. She's kind and empathetic. She's honest, and she'll certainly be one of the first people to reach out and ask a question. She sets those boundaries that are so important and really focuses in on the needs of whoever she's talking to. And she's also such a huge advocate for herself off the hotline as well. Working on a crisis hotline for survivors of sexual violence can be really difficult work. And through her time on the hotline, Sarah has been able to identify those moments where she really needs to step back and breathe and focus on herself and her own needs and reach out for support whenever she needs it. And it seems like such a little thing, but when you work with survivors of sexual violence, when you're listening to stories of trauma, it's so important that you put yourself and your needs first. And by doing that, you're really setting such an example for the folks that you're talking to, but also other people on our volunteer team. And she has been an advocate for our future volunteers too. Every semester in our counselor advocate training course, we have a volunteer panel. And she has been one of the volunteers that have been on the panel, I think, honestly, almost every semester since she finished. And her insight and her experiences that she shares with our sort of future volunteer team I can't even put into words how helpful it is and what an impact that she's made. She's been able to be transparent about her own worries and her own fears about being on the hotline, and really has used her experience to reassure others. And so we are just, I can't put into words how much her work on our hotline means both to us at SACS, but also I know the survivors that she's talking to on the hotline.
Congratulations, Sarah. We're so proud of you and thank you for all you do. And we are so lucky to have you on our volunteer team.
The YWCA is nominating Curtis Dennison as an outstanding volunteer. Curtis has been a long-time member of the YWCA Board of Trustees and is completing his 6th year in 2021. This has been Curtis's second two-term assignment on our Board of Trustees. Curtis graciously served as the chair of our trustees 2018 to 2020, expanding his term when I took over the executive director role to serve an additional year. I appreciated the stability of his leadership at that time. Curtis has been an engaged YWCA champion, serving as an active member of our auction committee, which prepares for our annual auction, our largest fundraiser each year. He solicits donations and attends regularly, bidding on items that support the organization. In 2020, with the advent of COVID, the auction went virtual. Curtis was the first one we considered to act as MC. He enthusiastically agreed to take on the role. Curtis's sound professional expertise and advice have been a pillar for the YWCA for many years. Thank you, Curtis, for all you've done for the agency.
I would like to recognize my 3 interns that interned with the YWCA Strive program for the past year, which are Mallory Pinto, Brianna Chaparro, and Alexis Mercado, who went above and beyond with being flexible, creative, empathetic, kind, and just going with the flow each and every day that they came in with us throughout COVID, throughout having to sometimes be quarantined, throughout having to sometimes just join us virtually. But you all were able to still fulfill your requirements for graduation, fulfill your requirements through your internship, along with creating long-lasting bonds with these young ladies that they will never forget the impact that you have made on them this year. And I wish you all the best of luck and congratulations, as you have all now graduated with your bachelor's degree in social work.
Hi, I'm Chris Kuja, the Performing Arts and Athletics Director here at the YWCA. I have 3 very special volunteers to honor. I have recognized many volunteers over the years, but never a father and his 2 daughters. Mr. Gary Farrell has been a volunteer in the dance department since his daughters graduated from our dance program in 2018 and 2019. He participates in every fundraiser we have done over the years. He then puts the profit he makes on the accounts of families that are struggling to pay their bills. Any request we put out on Facebook, he's the first to respond. Last year, during our COVID recital, he donated several cases of water for us to sell in the park. He is always there to lend a helping hand and support the dance program in any way he can. Victoria and Elizabeth Farrell danced with us for 15 years and were student teachers in our dance program while in high school. They continue to volunteer their time now, even now while they are in college. Both run our backstage at our annual recital. They have dedicated many hours helping to support our program. Whenever and whatever we need, they are always there to help, from passing out costumes, helping with recital rehearsals, making phone calls to parents, and running errands. No task is too small. We are so lucky to have alumni who know and love our program continue to volunteer their time. A father that took great pride in his daughter's activities, who led by example and instilled the importance of volunteering and giving back. It's no wonder that these 3 are being honored together. It is with great pleasure that the dance department recognizes Gary, Victoria, and Elizabeth Farrell as outstanding volunteers.
I'm Gary Farrell, and I volunteer at the YWCA because it's a fantastic place for kids to learn and develop their dance, social, and intellectual skills. My 2 daughters, Victoria and Elizabeth, started there when they were 3 and 4 years old. The Y helped to reinforce the values that my wife and I installed in our girls. Now that they are volunteers there themselves, I found it just as important to help out so other children can continue to experience this great place.
Victoria and I participated in the School of Dance as students, but also we were involved in student teaching. So we have spent countless hours and weekends in the Y, and it just wouldn't feel the same if we lost that connection.
We volunteer there because the YWCA School of Dance has become a second family to us over the many years of being a part of the Y and all the people we have met along the way. Even though we both have gone on to college and no longer are dancers, we love giving back to something that was and still is so near and dear to our hearts.
Wonderful. Thank you again to all our volunteers, the Board of Directors and the Board of Trustees for their dedication and leadership, and all the members, employees, donors, and friends who help us remain steadfast in carrying out our important mission of eliminating racism and empowering women. And now I'd like to say a few words about 2020. 2020 was a challenging year. With the onset of COVID, the YWCA was challenged every day. It impacted every aspect of our services and operations. Our agency response required sacrifice and innovation. From the very start, the YWCA had to reinvent itself to be there for the women and families we served. And as if this challenge were not enough, a second wave, long overdue, impacted us later in the spring. The second storm, created by a social justice movement, demanded greater action on behalf of communities of color and greater accountability from those in authority. This included the nonprofit community and the YWCA, whose mission has been the elimination of racism for more than 50 years. The story of 2020 is one of both momentum and setback, but 2020 demonstrated our grit and our ability to recreate ourselves when given the opportunity. Allison shared the numbers of people who were served in many of the programs, but they don't tell the full story. This story included the layoff and rehire of more than 2/3 of the YWCA's workforce. The story included the full closure of our building for 2 weeks before we pivoted to provide childcare for first responders, our only on-site service at the YWCA for several months. Story included the generous donations of masks, cleaning supplies, financial donations for the purchase of a sanitizing machine to increase the safety of children and staff at the YWCA. It's a story of board members who donated significant numbers of Stop and Shop gift cards at the beginning of the pandemic for staff who suddenly found themselves attached to an unemployment system, which was quickly overwhelmed and without resources for weeks. It's the story of grantors who quickly reached out, indicating that they were releasing us of any conditions they made on grants and forgiving us so that we could use the funding for operations just to survive. It's a story of individual donors who quickly began responding to calls for financial support, including running Facebook and GoFundMe fundraisers to assist us. It's a story of government relief programs and sustainability funds that enabled us to stay afloat when other sources of funding evaporated. It's the story of community partners, particularly the Consolidated School District of New Britain, which provided nursing assistance, student desks, and Wi-Fi expansion so we could best serve children. And the City of New Britain, who supported an outdoor dance recital at Walnut Hill Park. It's the story of my staff who endured furloughs and salary cuts so the agency could continue serving the community. Despite all this, and because of it, they pivoted quickly, learning the ins and outs of Zoom and virtual programming, quickly implementing and observing the safety protocols needed to keep children and other adults safe. They weathered and contributed to our response to the call for social justice, and amazingly, they continued to assist our agency's growth this year, including the purchase of a new building with the generosity of an anonymous donor. We know who you are, and we can't thank you enough. Setting up a virtual learning environment so children could continue to attend school and parents could return to work. Preparing innovative programming to train high school students as community health workers, and coordinating behavioral health services on New Britain's East Side. Also initiating rapid rehousing into sexual assault crisis services. So when you read our annual report, you'll be reading a dramatic story of challenge and of perseverance, one worthy of a best-selling novel, but it's real and it's true, and it's actually the story of each one of us during the pandemic. So to all of you, thank you. We could not have survived this past year without you. We have become stronger and more resilient as a result. And almost 6 months into 2021, I could say, I look forward to sharing information on our growth and success at next year's meeting. I'm now going to turn it back to Allison for some closing remarks.
Awesome. Thank you, Tracy. Well, that concludes our 2021 annual meeting. Thank you all for joining us virtually. I absolutely look forward to continuing to work with you all in the year ahead. I'm right with Tracy there. I'm excited for what the next year is going to bring. And now that things are returning to normal, I hope to see you all in person, or at least some of you soon. And have a great summer, everyone. See you all in the fall for our next meeting.